Measure of His Grief is about a Jewish physician who wages a campaign against circumcision and sort of paradoxically becomes more deeply engaged in his Jewish life in that process. I want to just give a little bit of background how I began writing about this. I began, after my sons were born, I began sort of tackling this topic. We're Jewish and they were circumcised, but that decision haunted me because it reflected my tradition but not my spirituality or my personal ethics. And so I started to write about it, and I soon realized I wanted to write in a way that would show my respect for Judaism alongside my opposition to the practice. And so I had to begin to study Judaism, and in the process I found myself feeling more deeply Jewish, as my main character does, and more strongly committed to Judaism. Anyway, so I had thought that, because that was my experience, I had thought this would make for an interesting story. In my research, I also came across information about something called foreskin restoration, which some of you might know about, in which circumcised men stretch their residual tissue over a period of months and sometimes years to cover the head of the penis. I started thinking about a Jewish novel that would explore this intriguing but little-known process of foreskin restoration. And actually, the concept of repair struck me as very rich because healing, tikkun olam, is really the central idea of Judaism. So the excerpt I'm reading, I do need to give you a little backstory first. The main character, Dr. Sandy Waldman, is the son of Holocaust survivors. He's an endocrinologist at a fictitious Berkeley HMO, and his father, who was also a physician, has died at the beginning of the book. At his father's shiva, Sandy experiences a mysterious, sharp genital pain, which he later comes to believe was a primitive memory of his own circumcision. He's afraid of a recurrence, so he starts avoiding sex. He soon becomes obsessed with circumcision research and begins to articulate all kinds of well-reasoned arguments against both the medical and even the Jewish aspects, but he's, forgive me, pissed off a number of colleagues and friends. He's a visionary and he pays the price. Meanwhile, he's neglected his wife Ruth, both sexually and emotionally. Ruth finds his obsession ridiculous and annoying, and thinks he's not facing up to his grief for his father, his anxiety about their daughter growing up, or the issues in the marriage. Ruth moves out, and Sandy spends a lot of the novel not grasping the reasons for their estrangement. So Sandy is very skeptical at first, but he does wind up attending a local support group of men engaged in this process of foreskin restoration. He thinks if he can resolve his discomfort with his penis, he will be able to go back to normalcy, sexual activity, and he assumes he'll be able to convince Ruth, his wife, to come back. So in this excerpt, Sandy has decided to come out to Ruth about his personal foreskin restoration project. He's unaware that she's been seeing someone else, and he intends to explain to her that he now sees a way through their problems. So this is Sandy talking now. Remember that website I found about those groups for men who want to stretch their skin to mimic the function of a foreskin? Yeah, those weirdos, she said, I remember. Well, it turns out that practice started like 2,500 years ago. It dates back to the Hellenic period, when Jews were trying to pass as Gentiles to avoid persecution. That's when this thing known as stretching began. And she swirled the wine around in her glass. Sandy took her glass and put it on the coffee table, took both her hands in his. See, originally, Ruthie, he said earnestly, circumcision wasn't a very radical procedure. It was just the tip of the foreskin that was removed. That's what's mandated in the Torah. Yeah, so? Well, there's historical evidence that the practice was made far more radical by the early rabbis so that Jewish men couldn't reverse it, at least not as easily. And that more radical procedure, that's what's still in practice today. She scrunched up her nose. You mean to tell me that circumcision was more moderate in biblical times than it is now? That's what I'm saying, yes. Well, she said, that's certainly counterintuitive, but I don't see what it has to do. Her eyes widened. Sandy, you're not trying to... Ruth, listen to me. I am trying it, and I'm telling you, it's helping. What do you mean, helping? I mean, mean, I'm feeling more whole, and I think I might have a little more sensation. I want to show you what I'm talking about. He let go of her hands and undid the button of his trousers. The belt buckle clinked. Ruth stood up again. Sandy, this is crazy. It's like chasing after some bizarre... Why don't you have a penis enlargement while you're at it? What? This is obsessive, she said. It's narcissistic. Ruth, please listen to me. This certainly wasn't going as he'd hoped. It's making me feel better. Doesn't that matter to you? She looked down at him. Have you ever considered that maybe one of your goals should be making me feel better? Sandy got up. Of course I have, and that's exactly why I want to become more whole, Ruth, so that I can... Sandy, this has gone too far. It's one thing to take a stand, but it's something else to associate yourself with a bunch of bizarre people who have nothing better to do with themselves than play with some flap of skin to see how long they can grow it. It's sophomoric is what it is, a pissing contest. Ruth, or maybe circle jerk would be a more apt term. Ruth, he said again, then more quietly, actually, it's with the support of those bizarre people, as you put it, that I'm starting to feel more... She blanched. Did you actually go to one of those groups? Well, I just one time. He shuffled, hating the fact that they were having this conversation standing up. You met with men who want to do the same thing? Okay, Ruth, it was kind of weird, sure, but... Ruth, this isn't like you at all. I mean, are you actually invoking Groucho here? That I shouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member? And she says, no pun intended, I suppose, member.